Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Life Talks. Today I have Thomas Andrew on, and I met him from grounding camp. Got the shirt on right now. Um, and what I really liked about grounding camp was it was basically, to me anyway, it was a bunch of people coming together trying to figure out, how we navigate forward and understanding how what our value structures are and all that. I guess maybe I could start by asking, um, what did you get out of grounding camp when you went?
Mhm.
What made you go?
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
start there.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, and thank you for having me on as well. It's I look forward to like having conversations with like-minded people and people who've um I share a lot in common with. It's really cool because in grounding camp when I went, I think this was back in September of 2020, and that was really an interesting time just with everything with COVID and
Yeah,
all that crazy stuff happening. Those were like crazy times, and we're still even like living through all that to this day. But yeah, for me, what I got the most out of grounding camp was, I mean, I think the value of it can't be overstated. At least what it is I had gotten from it, because it kind of built up momentum for me in a way, because 2020 was a rough time in my life, just with feeling like I was really getting off the path, like with regards to my purpose and what I believe that, well, because I'm a religious person myself. I'm a Christian, consider myself a Christian, and I felt like I was really like not following God's will for my life, and I was pursuing my own path, and it was a thing of, but it wasn't in line with my purpose. It was just kind of doing whatever, going with the flow. So it was a thing where I felt like I was compromising my beliefs in some areas, like my integrity. And so
it's a
it's
good
kind of
word.
thing where, um, yeah, integrity. And Elliot, from like the videos I had seen, especially what he'd been putting out, how he kind of changed what it was that he used to be talking about, because he used to only talk about like fitness and whatnot, but
Yeah,
he really went into on his YouTube channel just these different things about providing structure as men for our own lives, and being solid, stable people. And so I was like, when I saw the opportunity for grounding camp to meet him in person and to meet with like-minded men who were really trying to like be on their path, it's like I felt like that would be beneficial to me so that I could um, build that up for myself.
yeah, yeah. I definitely share similar views on that because I was just like, how I- people are not critically thinking about what's going on and how everything is interconnected and the fear. I mean, there was so much fear going around, um, that it was like almost debilitating. And you speak about religion, and I think that's one of the problems. Religion has caught such a bad rap. It's like to say the word religion, or I mean, you follow Jordan Peterson, I'm sure, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what I love what he says when he's asked about God is that he says, "Well, I don't like that question because what do you mean by God?" And I love that his response to that because I think the word God and the word religion scares people away, and even it's fusing into politics as well. So what happens is the default becomes people don't want to talk about politics or religion. And at least in the past year for me, I've realized that what people are saying when they say that to me is that they don't have a value structure. So if you don't have a value structure, then you don't want to talk about anything. You don't want to take accountability for your actions. And I recognize that myself too, right? When I was younger, and understanding that no, your value structure is going to create your navigation, how you move forward. So it's not, but the problem is too, it's like because there's so much guilt and shame in our culture, that's what, to me, I think a lot of the institutions have, they've, this is quoting Alan Watts, and I agree with this part, is that it's like weaponized guilt and shame. So sinning, for example, becomes you're bad rather than no, you're not bad. You're on the wrong path. So let's get you on the right path versus you're bad, you're bad. So because when you shame and guilt somebody, that's going to push them away from it. So you have to have the path of redemption, but you also have to take accountability. So, and I think to balance both of those, I think deep down that's what people are hungry for. And to go back to what we originally talked about, that's why I went to grounding camp, because it was just like, why doesn't anybody want to talk about it? It's like, oh no, I'd rather not talk about it. Hey, the divorce rate is over 50%. Let's just go along. Let's just go for the ride anyway. Like, no, let's try to understand why we're doing what we're doing. To me, it's crazy. If we're not communicating and trying to develop that communication, we're just going to create the same mistakes. And I see that in my own life play out as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's because that's you hit the nail on the head. I think especially with regards to word, I think you used redemption, because I mean that's a biblical theme as well, and it's really it's terrible what's happened with our culture, and that's not touched upon, especially with regards to men, in particular, well, men and women. And these are all things that we need to hear with regards to redemption, and how, like, with our culture, we don't stress that enough, and so much of that is because of that stigma, like you said, towards religion. It's a thing of specific, because I I prefer to use the term. I know of other Christians who use this too. They'll say something along the lines of, it's not, I I don't prefer calling it a religion, prefer calling it a relationship, because with that, it's relating to that higher power, that what we all know of, that transcendent, that which is transcendent, and which is above the temporal, that which is above the just strictly the material. And our culture and society is so materialistic that we don't focus on anything just beyond what it is that's in front of our faces. Whereas there's so much more than that is integral to humanity. And you mentioned Jordan Peterson as well. He touches on that so much. It's the thing where he'll have conversations with atheists, and they're stressing just strictly the scientific, strictly the material, when what is transcendent is like the values that, like, we hold in our society. And when you do away with the transcendent, you lose that which is holding Western civilization together. And so it's no wonder that men feel like they don't have a place in life, like that they're lost, and that they don't have a purpose. That was the way that I was back in 2020. I felt like I had no purpose. I was just doing my own thing, and I mean, I'm not going to get into all necessarily the past mistakes I've made, but
Sure,
it's a
sure.
thing where I went to grounding camp so that I could, like, help put in place that structure in my life that I needed. And it was just great, because when I came back from it, what was impressed on my mind was just how passionate everyone else was in the group, um, for being men who could provide that structure in their own lives. And it was just really cool, because I even had conversations with different guys in the group, and everybody, gave me feedback. I remember when we had that, when we were in the auditorium, as it were, where there was that circle, and we were
Mhm.
all just talking about each other's issues and
Yeah.
everything, and that was just incredible. So yeah, we really need something like that. We need that sort of
Yeah,
support
what was
in
cool about
society.
that is and for people listening, basically, I think it was fellowship, right? And fellowship is this idea that it's almost like there's no judgment, but you're gonna share your shit. You're not perfect. You're gonna put your own balls on the line. And then there was other aspects of it where it was like we're gonna build you up now too. And going back into what we were just talking about, the redemption thing, at least what I've noticed in my own life is that there's two paradigms at the same time that are true. And the problem with, I think, redemption is that if you just give the idea like, oh, you're forgiven, you're forgiven, you're forgiven, what that does is it programs you, oh, I can just do whatever I want. So there's a kind of falsity in like just forgiving everyone and everything all the time. But I think for me, at least, this is the clarity that I've gotten is that everything is not your fault for your sin. And at the same time, it's your responsibility. So so those two things, because and the one complements the other because the one gives you the understanding. I think you have to dive into it's not your fault. And if, at least for me, that's what I've done the past year. Understanding relationships with my, my parents, my father specifically, and my friends, and then just watching how people interact and seeing myself and other people, um, is that we're all screwed up, screwing each other up. And when you understand that, that's where the responsibility aspect comes in. So I think at least for me, that's what I've said. And because when you operate in that, then you can have true compassion for other people. You don't judge other people, but you know that they're going the wrong way. You can guide them the right way in the right in the right tone, because if you're too much into judgmental, they're going to reject you. If you're too much into forgiveness pushover, it's just like, oh, then there's no accountability, so they're only going to be connecting with you because you make their ego feel good, in a sense. Does that make sense? Do you agree?
Yep. I almost sneezed there for a second. My pardon me. Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. So that exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head with that too, because with that, that's one thing that I think it that's talked about in certain Christian circles. For example, the concept of there is redemption at play, because that's we all need that. We all have a past. We all have
Correct. The second I
issues in
judge
our
you, I
lives
better
and
be
things.
perfect. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Mhm.
He who has no sin cast the first stone.
Exactly. Yeah, he who has no sin casts the first stone. And the thing with it is that but something else you also said too was you mentioned redemption, but also um, the whole issue with forgiveness and just using it, because the thing is we can't use the forgiveness of God and redemption as a means, as a license for sin, because like you said, we have to take responsibility. And I think that's part of what grace teaches us, is like, because that's something that is taught, at least in my church, like the motivating factor for why you take responsibility is the grace that's been given. You've been forgiven, so therefore it's your responsibility to walk in a way that is virtuous, walk in a way that's befitting of the grace that you've been given. And so we don't recognize that enough, because a lot of people, they'll take grace for granted and say God will just forgive me no matter what it is I do. But that's not living in a way that is grateful for what it is that you have, and it's not showing that thankfulness. So and that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I think I think the redemption naturally, at least as I'm saying, is it comes through understanding. That's been a recurring idea that's been there, is that because like I've been really um playing with the idea of like there's this idea that people ought to forgive other people, you know, in the sense that like you can't fake it. You when you understand it, when you understand thyself, you naturally are a forgiving person. So you understand that if people could be better, that they would be better, because you understand your previous version of yourself when you're stuck in negative feedback loops, that um you understand your own negative feedback loops in order to forgive other people's negative feedback loops, and that's all they're stuck in. And I think the bigger the negative feedback loops, the it expressed in a person, the harder it is to forgive that person, because you can't understand why people would do that. And it's it's really, you can't forgive anybody unless you understand them. So I think it's actually better to be honest and say, if you don't forgive somebody, that it's better to be, I think that's a precursor to true forgiveness. Because people could say, "Oh, I forgive you," but they don't. They harbor that in their heart. So you can lie to other people, say, "Oh, I forgive you," or feel that you ought. It's not an obligation. You naturally are a forgiving person when you understand why people do what they do. And the only way you can understand why people do what they do is to understand your own patterns. Think about how many times in your own life you said you're going to do something and then you don't do it, or you just say one thing, you do another. I've done that plenty of times in my life. Not even on a superficial. I said to you before, I like the that word integrity. That's been my word to strive to, um, because I understand that even small things, like you say, "Oh, I'll be there. I'll be at a certain time at a certain time at a certain place," and then I won't follow through. And it's not like this evil, malicious thing, but it is something that, um, it's a lack of integrity. So I understand that on a small scale. Then you can say, well, what would happen if somebody continues to feed that and then it grows into this? And so, I think the way to, basically, I'm ranting now, but the idea is that people should think, I think, less on forgiveness and more on understanding, because it's a natural byproduct of understanding, right? There's this idea that you ought to be a good Christian and forgive everyone. No, no, no. Just understand yourself, right? Which goes back into the two ideas: love God with all your strength and all your heart and all your might. What does that mean? That's such a handful. It's such a word. Like, even when I say that, it's like I get this, like, oh, he's this religious type. I don't like that. To me, Christ is not somebody religious, right? He embodied it. So to love God with all your heart and all your is to trust your intuition, which is thyself instead of myself. It's thy kingdom, right? It's internal. To trust that, even though the world's going to hate you, the world will hate you no matter what you do. You say, "I like chocolate," someone's going to say, "I like vanilla." So regardless, so build that on the value structure, and then love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than that. And you love your neighbor by understanding yourself, which is the first commandment. Love God, love the understanding that's internal.
Mm. Oh, for sure. Yeah, and there's a saying in North Carolina. You'll see it on like the sign, like a state sign when you come in on like the
That's
highway.
where you're from?
Yeah,
Yeah.
North Carolina. Yeah, it says on the sign when you drive in, "Welcome to North Carolina," and then there's like a little saying in quotation marks, "To be rather than to seem," which I thought is just a really powerful
To be
saying, just
rather
in
than to
general, with
seem.
regards to what exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I
so
think that should
character over personality.
yeah, and it's like you said, going back to like honesty and understanding. It's I know Jordan Peterson, he likes to stress that issue of the truth. And even Jesus said, "I am," what did he say? "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And so it's the thing where truth isn't something that we can just, it is something that is, what was the word? Flippant, or it's of no consequence. Like truth is integral, because that's how you, it's knowing truth is how we then know we know God, and how we can be in right fellowship with Him. Um, and there was something else I was going to say as well, but I've lost my train of thought. But it's a thing of, yeah, honesty, and like just being truthful, and that plays into integrity.
Hmm. Yeah, there's one thing. No one comes to the Father except through me. To me, it's like I read scripture now. Every time I hear it, is like, to me, it's like a riddle, right? It's something to be understood internally, and it's not something to be preached. Christ said, um, "You read the scriptures daily, and in them you think you have life." Something similar to that. That quote, and the way I heard that is just like, you can read the Bible every day. It doesn't it's not enough. Like, to just say, "Here's the Bible, here's the Bible." No, no, no. It's to no one comes to the Father except through Christ. So no one comes to judgment except through the heart. So when um that means is that no matter when you can't be a good leader unless you have an open heart, in a sense. You can't be a good judge if you don't have an open heart. Otherwise, you become like this dictator. You have that. So And the only way you can get to that is through radical humility. So when you're in that radical humility, you actually, Jordan Peterson, and this is something too that because he talks about power, and there's two types of power, and it's the power. Everybody wants power, but it depends on the idea of the power. So if the power is sought after, which would go similar to the North Carolina saying that you were the to seem rather than to be. To seem is political power.
It's the other way around. To be rather than to see.
To be rather than to
Because
seem. So
that plays into appearances, right? Like you're
correct.
not just wanting to appear as something, you
Correct.
want to be that.
Yeah. Correct. Because to seem is personality. It's the persona. It's the acting rather than to be it is to embody it. And then you're not even thinking. Let not the left hand know what the right hand is doing. You're actually embodying it. And yeah, that's something I heard recently
Yeah.
too. Is the persona. The persona is the mask. And yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy stuff.
It's so interesting because like you hit on a lot of different things that
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
thinking
I
about
go like
myself
Jordan
as of late.
Peterson because he's all over the place too. And it's just like because there's so many points and sub points in each thing that you say. It's like, yeah, I kind of lose my train of thought sometimes.
Yeah, I was watching the other day. I was doing because I think I told you before. I'm writing a book as of present. It's essentially a retelling of my own life and my own story, but through what like it would what is the word? It would integrate as well into the story though. I'm trying to bring in uh different examples of things that have been inspirations for me into that. So I'm doing research because essentially I'm going to play with different biblical concepts and biblical archetypes rather, because archetypes are the foundation of every story. Because when you see different stories that you can take J.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, and essentially I think Jordan Peterson said in one of his lectures, they're deriving the basis of that from prior mythological stories. And so that's what's so interesting is how a good writer, he doesn't have necessarily an originality, because that's kind of been I've been watching some lectures with regards to English literature as well in preparation for writing my story. So essentially what is talked about in these lectures I've been watching is that a good writer doesn't have to be original per se, because generally what is looked at as the hallmark of a good story in present day Western civilization, because this wasn't what they looked for prior to, I'm guessing it was the 1950s, 1960s, like, or it might have been even prior to that, but not by a lot. Like, because in many centuries prior, when it came to the Greeks, the Romans, and leading up to present day civilization, I think it was the period of the Romantics, and I forget which era that was, if it was in the 1700s, somewhere like that. But yeah, not anything really prior to that as far as I'm aware. The hallmark of what makes a good story, what is what people look for, is that you're deriving something from other stories, because it's you finding what is the what are the key themes, and writing in such a way that is compelling, and that brings these themes to light, because anyone can try to can be quote unquote original, but essentially what you're doing when you're trying to do that is make an inferior version of the archetype itself.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. I can clarify further, but yeah, it's kind of what I've been learning as of late.
So would that be in the sense that it's like there's a universal code that binds us together, and that you create a story through that code rather than going outside of it for your own. Because I definitely agree with what you're saying in the sense, like, you see it in, like, Lion King. He talks about Lion King as well. And like, there's certain things, like, he's seeking the father. He loses his father early in the movie, and then he kind of, at least the way I extrapolate a little bit from what Jordan Peterson says, as far as that movie goes, where he basically, Simba loses his father, and then he goes out and he's going to smoke pot with his friends Pumbaa and Timon, and he just kind of doesn't care about life, zero responsibility, you know. And then he's called to, hey, you know what, we need you, we're losing, losing the kingdom, and we need you, and he has to overcome guilt and shame of his resentment, and that's it. It's fitting into that same narrative that, return to that, and then he goes to see his father in the reflection in the lake, and he realizes it's within him. So that is the similar thing that's shown in different movies. So is that what you mean, that it's following basically universal? Is that what you mean by that, where it's you're basically repeating a history, repeating the same story in a different expression of the same story, in essence?
It's exactly that. Yeah,
Okay.
it's that concept of, because if you recall, I think Elliot Holsey talks about this as well, in that it's that return to the father.
Yeah,
And I think
paternal
that's just
pattern.
so, we don't hear that enough, is that idea of the return to the father. And it's like you said, it's like that. It's so funny how, like, Disney and like the Lion King, like that, something what that's generally seen as like a kid's story. We're able to, people like Jordan Peterson are able to like derive so much,
Yeah.
they're able to see the archetypes underlying these stories, and then dissect them in such a way that's compelling for us. And that's why a story is compelling to begin with, is that they have that groundwork for archetypes. And part of the reason why I stress that is because I don't know if you guys remember, there was like a fireside at grounding camp. And one thing, because I know Elliot came out for that a little, like, midway through the whole fireside thing, where all of us, we came together during grounding camp, and we were just there by the fire hanging out. And there was an opportunity where I was able to ask, I mean, several people were talking to Elliot, but I got the opportunity to ask him a question. And one of my questions I asked was with regards to what is it that makes for a compelling villain? Because I started that process of coming up with ideas for my story. And keep in mind, this is in light of, like, this is 2020, and back in early 2020 was when I made my, my past mistakes and whatnot, and this kind of thing where I was getting off my course. So I was trying to learn in many ways about these sorts of archetypes so that I can influence my thinking. So not only for my story, but for my own benefit as a person. And so it's multifaceted in me asking the questions that I did when I was there. But one of the questions I asked him was, what makes for a compelling villain? And the reason why I asked is because with so many villains nowadays, I mean, if you just, that I can give you like Star Wars as an example. Like, what we used to look at a Darth Vader, and it's like, that's a compelling villain, right?
Mm.
It's like he has this presence about him, and he has this competency that you see it, and he's compelling as a character. And the choices that different like characters make, it's informed by a certain archetype. Like, you don't want a villain who doesn't have a clue what he's doing.
Yeah.
You don't
You
want
don't
a
want a
villain
weak
who's
villain,
competent.
correct.
Yeah, because like, that doesn't give the protagonist anything to overcome.
Correct.
And you want that in a story, like something that the protagonist can overcome, because that's part of the archetype itself of the hero's journey.
Yeah. That's well said.
Mhm.
And it's also, to even add that, this is why I mean, Jordan Peterson, man. I mean, the fact that he's so into understanding the villain, because the villain is within. That's the crazy part. And at least the way I say it, the way Luke overcomes Darth Vader in that is because he recognizes himself in him, right? Because it's that at first he rejects him, right? He goes, "I'm your father," and he's like, "No, he can't even fathom." But then over time, he understands that he under he understands it over time that without saying it, that he is how he can get to that place, which goes back to the thing to understand is the only way you can overcome. It's the only way you can forgive is to understand. So if he didn't understand his father, he wouldn't have been able to overcome. And yeah, yeah, I love how Jordan Peterson goes into that because the I think one of the big problems we have politics, religion, all this. You're the enemy, not me. And that's the wrong way of looking at it. It's hate the sin, not the sin. So it's the value structure. It's the way we're coming to see the world that is the problem, not the world. And um, it's our vision. It's our internal vision. You can see doom or and gloom, or you can see something beautiful, or you see it as it is. It's thy way, and I think that's where radical trust comes in too. Eh, that's been have you heard of David Hawkins at all?
The name doesn't ring a bell. No, I don't think so.
He has some lectures online, um, and he speaks on that. It's thy way versus my way, and I've really just been as I get older, it makes sense to me. It's like, same, you hear that, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. So thy, what is that? The thy is the different than my, because me, Michael, I don't have a clue what I need to do in order to help other people, in order to be of service to other people, because who the hell am I? I don't know. The only way I can know is to know thyself, and thyself is that which is within you, which is within all of the people I've talked to. Um it's the eternal code that's within all of us, and it's like an operating
The eternal
system.
pattern.
Yes, the pattern, the pattern, yeah, correct. And he made a good Elliot made a good point with that. And pattern, paternal, mother, matriarchy, and then it's yeah, it's to understand the pattern is it's no, you don't have to try anymore. I think too, it's because you're like locked in, so you don't have to try to be a good person. You understand why. Then it just you're running on something higher at that point. I think about the idea of how Christ on the cross. To me, it's like it, because to me it's not even it's what makes somebody do that. It's not necessarily like, you know, he's so good, he embodies so good, because he does, but what makes somebody give their life? So for others, so it's the only thing that can, again, it goes back to the understanding of the pattern. It's the only thing, because to the egoic me, why would I do that? These people, forget these people. I take care of me. So it requires such a radical state of humility and understanding to do something like that, to sacrifice, or even, I've watched David Goggins. Much respect, 100-mile runs, 8 weekends in a row, 800 miles, 8 weeks. So it's not even like, wow, he's so cool, I want to do 200 miles. It's not even like that. It's like, what makes somebody get to that place where it's just like you're operating on another level. So, and I think, again, it comes through deep understanding. You understand yourself so much that you can, as Jordan Peterson says, you can be a monster but not, it's to be in the world but not of it. That you grow teeth but you choose not to use them. That's the difference between um passivity and um choosing not to fight somebody. Passivity is, oh, I just don't want any conflict, so I'm going to run away. Choosing not to fight somebody is a lot different. And that's something that I've realized in the past couple of years too, because a deliberate decision requires deep understanding versus defaulting to always running away.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because that it it reminds me of something that I'm writing in my story, essentially with the story that I'm writing. And I'll send you the book once I get it actually finished, because I'm kind of going through. I've written some portions, but what's interesting in the story that I'm writing is the main character essentially goes through something like that, because it's supposed to be like I guess you could say a medieval sort of fantasy type story, but it it's bringing in those themes of what it is that we've been discussing, that all these different concepts. Part of what the main character has to do himself is to learn to grow teeth, and how, like, develop the skills, like develop his capacity for violence,
Mm.
for the means of like developing himself and for protecting those that he loves. And so that's integral, because like part of what grew me as a person from the person who I was back in 2020 and like prior to having gone to grounding camp to who I am now is part of, well, I feel like an integral part has been me having gone and participated in martial arts. That's something I do. I do mixed martial arts. That's not for everybody, but that's one way to sort of to learn some lessons that you might not have gotten otherwise, because it taught me about the importance of having thick skin, and
Yeah.
being okay with adversity and pressing on through it. Because that was one thing. The in the story, the protagonist is initially met with three different forces of malevolence: the force of sloth, of fear, and lust. So these three forces of malevolence, and they meet him at a young age, and so it's things are implanted in his head from a young age, and they come to his surface as he gets older. And I think that happens with all of us as we develop. We each have our own vices,
Correct.
and we each have things that the spiritual. What is it in that verse in Ephesians? Spiritual hosts of wickedness in the high places.
Yeah.
The demons know exactly what is our vice, and
Correct.
so in the story that I'm writing, it's like the protagonist has to learn to overcome that, specifically with regards to sloth, and or in other words, laziness, or I think Eliot has put it as effeminacy.
Mm.
There was a question I asked him too. It's like how you overcome the demon of effeminacy, because essentially what he said was Saint Thomas Aquinas. He defined it effeminacy as an aversion to pain and an attachment to pleasure. And so
Mm.
that's precisely what I'm trying to show in the story, is like this demon of effeminacy, or it's a demon
Yeah.
of sloth, and how the means of overcoming that, you really have to put yourself through a form of adversity, whatever that may be, so that you learn how to overcome that, how to go beyond your limits of what you've in a sense like imposed on yourself, but is embodied in the story as an outside force, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. No, it does. 100%. And that's essentially to be born again too. Because I would always heard that phrase, born again Christian. Then I come to realize many people who say that, not born again. To be born again is to really to fully overcome um uh yeah, for men, effeminacy. I was raised by a single mother. So, and I always say she was a great mother. She wasn't a good father. She couldn't be. So, um, and yeah, that you nailed that one, because that's the masculine is to overcome adversity. And it doesn't mean that there's pieces on both sides, but yeah, I like the yin and the yang. I think the yin and the yang is good. It's a good representation to embody the masculine but understand the feminine and vice versa. Um,
Mhm.
that but the problem becomes when it becomes flipped, becomes inverted. Um, and I mean, you can see that. You don't have to look too far in our culture. Um, it's and it's funny because when I talk about this, there's this idea that it's like, oh, what do you try? Because there's a, I think in the culture, it's like it's this idea that you fight, you try to pretend. Going back to that thing, it's seeming versus being. And it's very good. It's very good that you brought that up because that really applies to this. You can seem like a masculine man, but to be a masculine, the best I've come up with is recently dug into Hard Times, Create Strong Men. And
Mhm.
it's the idea of polarity really keeps coming back to me, right? Because while men and women need to stop fighting each other. I mean, the idea that it's just we're two polarities. That's really it to me, because when you put it into polarity, it's not, it's just when you're in your polarity, you become an attractive aspect of that magnet to the opposite. So it's not like it, it's natural. That's what brings, that's the creative process too. And but when you fake it, it's, to me, that's more, um you're gonna get a fake, you become a fake magnetic pole. So you're going to attract that which you are falsifying in a sense. So if you want to be around people who are real, be real. If you want to, um, attract a feminine woman, you become a masculine man. But to the extent that you fake it, which you can't lie to yourself, that's the whole thing. And that's, I think, an aspect of overcoming too. Um, because that was me more so when I was younger. It was like, you get caught up in the world. Oh, I want to be the alpha male. Well, what does the alpha male mean? What does that really mean? Right? Not, I'm the top guy. I I think you nailed it with the word before, is bringing up the word integrity. It is to um it's following through, it's structure, it's blueprint, it's pattern, and that's associated with toxic masculinity, which is a joke. I mean, it's
Yep. Because like what toxic, there's the supposed like qualities that like a lot of like people are putting the label of toxic towards is precisely what it is that women are attracted to. So it's kind
correct.
of a thing of like, look, why would that label be put on what is essentially a revelation of truth? You know, like this is
Yes.
qualities that are inherent in us men, and we shouldn't distance ourselves from that. Because when I was young, I, for whatever reason, had the same issue where I would pursue what the world saw as, or what I thought was the
Correct.
world's idea of oh, this is what women value, or this is what girls value,
Yeah.
and to nobody's surprise, like it's not attractive to women. That I didn't have the best luck in my dating life when I was a kid. But whereas it's gotten better since. But the thing is, it's exactly like you said. We
It
can't.
naturally gets better as you understand that internal self, because it's no longer, it's so funny because 5 years ago we said, like trusting God. I'd be like, what are you talking? Like now it's like, no, it's trusting internal fully, because you're not trying to impress anybody. It's not, but which ultimately makes you more of an attractive person in general. And then as that, and that goes back into, we were talking power before, right? Because it's growing in competence versus political power. Political power is sought. Competence is a natural byproduct of being competent, doing the right thing for its own sake for no reward. You become naturally a powerful person. And Jordan Peterson, as he says, what are we gonna do? Get rid of power, get rid of competence, and have zero structure forever? That's retarded. It doesn't make any sense. So no, you would want, embody value, embody that structure for, and because it's a structure that is self-sustaining. It's
Mhm.
That's really also what it comes. We won't survive if we're not self-sustaining. We'll destroy ourselves because we see the other as opposite. Um, and yeah, and it's yeah, it goes back to it's thy way versus my way again.
There was one thing I was going to touch on too that you had said. It was something in a Facebook post you had mentioned, which I thought was just it was really great because it goes right in line with the saying of to be rather than to seem. You had mentioned it was in a Facebook post. It was a rather short sentence, but like it was really great. Where you're essentially saying like, um, embody what it is that you believe rather than merely say it. Like rather than like just simply preach it,
Mm.
you are going to like embody that in your life and practice it. And I'm just like that because that's what it means to be a Christian, like, and or to be living in light of that transcendent pattern that is like before us. And because that's one thing though that we can't discount with that though is the importance of telling the truth and stating the truth to people so that other people can practice the same thing, because language is a creative force. It in the beginning was the word, right? In the beginning God said let there, and so on and so forth. The word, like the words we say are fundamentally creative and they bring things to pass. And so we have a responsibility as men to proclaim the truth, but at the same time, we have the responsibility to embody it. Because if you're merely stating things, but you're not practicing it, then that integrity is lost.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, and you embody it through understanding. Um, I posted two on Facebook. This is from someone I follow on Twitter, Zach. Um, he I have it up here. He says, I don't push this is so good. I don't push Jesus on my friends. I have many friends who are not believers and completely turned off from the idea. I respect them for where they stand. The very minute they have struggle or adversity and call on me is when I get to show them Jesus without saying a word about him. I was just like, I mean that's essentially the same thing, right? It's
Mhm.
you're it's not like, well, Jesus will save you. No, no, no. You become
Yeah.
that which you value and you look up to. So yeah, embodiment. And I learned that, I used to personal train. I used to see it all over the place. It's all the body shaming, all this. It's like you want to really lead people to get into the gym and work out and be the healthiest version of themselves, be the healthiest version of yourself and work out. And then naturally, like, oh, people want that energy. They want to be around energy of just like, oh, wow, who doesn't want to be strong? Like to be a strong version of themselves. So, but you don't do that from shaming and guilting people. Um, you do it by, yeah, leading, embodying it 100%.
One thing I wanted to share with you as well as something interesting for your audience, but for you as well to ponder. Um, it was back in maybe it was 2016, 2017. So yeah, years ago, I went to a Christian camp in the mountains of Brevard, North Carolina, and it was an incredible experience because I went through what was called a CIT program, camper in training, and it was essentially like 2 weeks of going over a passage in, I believe it was Second Peter chapter 1, where he goes through a list of virtues. It's either Second Peter or verse or First Peter. I think it's Second Peter chapter 1, where it talks about a list of virtues of putting on, uh, well, putting on excellence or virtue, knowledge, self-control, and there's a bunch of different other ones in that list. And I can send it to you later. But the interesting thing about it is it starts with it starts with put, or at least in the King James translation, is put on virtue. And what is virtue? Virtue, as defined when you look at it in context, is essentially excellence. It is the practice of a thing, or something that fulfills its purpose. And what is the purpose in the they talked about it in the camp, like, okay, and this is the context of Christians. It's like, okay, so what is the Christian's purpose. And when you dig down deep into it, they came up with a definition that I think is just brilliant. It's when you put on virtue, it's what are you doing as a Christian? You put on virtue, and that is purposing to develop and display the character of Jesus for the glory of God. So when you mull over that whole definition, purposing to develop and display the character of Jesus. Okay, who is Jesus? Jesus is, for all intents and purposes, the embodiment of the archetype that is
Yes.
within, the perfect embodiment of that. And so when you purpose, so that you're making a plan, you're purposing to develop, so like you're building up that pattern and putting, like, embodying, as like you said, embodying that pattern that is within you is Jesus. It's like you're embodying that pattern as laid out in the Bible for the glory of God. It's not about us, it's about him. And so it just puts that paradigm shift, like the way we generally think in society, on its head. It turns it on its head because you're putting into practice these sorts of things, and that leads you down the path towards the rest of the qualities, because it's not an arbitrary list of qualities. I think the next one that follows is knowledge, and knowledge is essentially, I'm not going to repeat the definition of knowledge because I probably would get it wrong from memory, but it's learning and understanding the archetype. Essentially, it's learning and understanding, because what they would say in that is Jesus, and what all about the divine transcendent archetype that is there. It's that which transcends the material, the physical. And it's so incredible because our society doesn't focus on that. It focuses strictly on what is in front of us. And yet we pride ourselves in how advanced we are and in how enlightened we are. Yet we're denying that which has been the very foundation of society, and of, because the ancient civilizations, they didn't neglect the spiritual. In fact, that was what they put front and center,
Yeah.
was the spiritual. And when you neglect that, you're neglecting that which is the pattern, the foundation for all of life going forward. And no wonder there's so much lack of balance in our society, all these different issues that men face. Men have no purpose. I feel like suicide rates are through the roof. Mental health is on a rapid decline, yet we got all these advancements in
Yeah, and even
science
even all
and
these
technology.
mandates. I mean, the amount of hypocrisy in the mandates and
Yeah.
the science. We'll trust this science, but not this science. Oh, well, this doesn't make sense. Oh, well, shut up. That's disinformation. I mean, yeah, we're losing a pattern of understanding. Um, and yeah, it's well said as far as, you always heard like, what would Jesus do, right? That's the highest. It's the highest archetype. You're aiming for the highest archetype of yourself. What would be the highest version of yourself? Well, putting others first to the extent of death. I mean, that's up there, right? But it's not martyrdom. At least that's what I've come to understand recently too. It's not martyrdom, because there's a part of me that's like, I think Jordan Peterson was talking about this as well. It's the idea of like nihilism, where you just be like, oh, I could just be the martyr, right? So
Mm.
it's not that, because that's a trap. I fell into that trap for a little bit. Like, oh, I'm so holy, I would die for you, right? He's like, no, that's not it. It's I'm willing. I think it's more, I don't want to. I really don't want to. I think it's more, I don't want to, but I'm willing to, because I think that's more real. It's the idea of, no, I don't want to, but I know that's the highest version of whatever it is. And there's another idea I wanted to talk to with you, is it's been huge for me. And I think I want to bring it up because I like reminding people, because I like to be reminded of it, is that every single thing you do matters. I love that, because it's, he says that so well. It's, you're a node in a network. So you having this conversation, you're going to have other conversations with other people. I'm going to have conversations, and it's when you start to realize every single thing you do matters, it's not from the egoic. And I don't even feel like I have to really explain this, because I think you already know this, right? But I guess for listeners who are on the path, it's just, It's when you realize every single thing you do matters. It's not ego where it's like, I'm so special, everything I do matters. No, it's literally everything you do matters because, like, you see the guy at the gas station, your interaction with him is going to influence how he's going to spend the rest of his day and how that affects other people. The more you understand that, again, being underneath that understanding, it's you can't help but be the highest version of yourself. But I think you get lit as you go into the path, you start, at least for me, I've seen that more and more, is simply just giving a smile to someone, a natural smile, it's so much more powerful than um, even us having this conversation. I mean, those moments are what really which go back into virtue, right? It's I see myself in you. I do, I'll always do with that. And all this stuff going on right now too, because maybe we could leave on this point on, what people can do, because I'm not going to go into the details of everything going on. People know what's going on. And if at this point people don't understand what's going on as far as like the mandates and how many lies have been perpetuated, I'm not going to try to convince somebody because that'll push them further away. Um, but I think regardless of what side people are on politically, or oh, I don't believe in religion, because there's still going to be people who have that view. Well, the best thing I think you could do is really is virtue. Be the most virtuous you can, and because it does come back to you um, over time. And I think that's in the world of instant gratification, we expect it right away. But as you plant those seeds to really help other people to the best of your ability, right? And understanding how you help other people is going to be dependent on what they need, which goes back into the highest version of yourself is thyself. Because who the hell am I to know what you need? I can only know that by being present with you, and really just healing relationships. I mean, healing relationships internally, that's what I'm doing the best I can with my family, trying to heal relationships, because that's going to, it reaffirms the ideal. When I embody the ideal, it reaffirms that the ideal is possible within other people. And as that grows, it will come back. It's the best gift you can give somebody. And, as much as I talk about it, it's not an easy thing to do. It really is not an easy thing to do. You say the idea of like telling the truth. It's not an easy thing to tell the truth. Superficially, sure, right? Yeah, we all want to tell the truth. We all want to, but when push comes to shove and people are going to lose their jobs because they're not going to follow their value structure, well, people will lie to themselves, and we lied in different ways. And I think, that goes back into the beginning, the humility. I think, um, no one comes to the Father except through the Son. You have to be naked, mentally speaking. You have to be humble, and um, and that requires a lot of trust, because when you own all of your bullshit, um, people will judge you for that. People will
Mm.
judge you, people will shame you, people will guilt you, people will use that against you. And that's part of the game, it seems like. So you have to be ready for that. And the beautiful part about that, though, is you get to see who's real. You get to see who weaponizes that against you, and you grow stronger in that process. It seems to be.
Mm. Oh yeah,
It's
yeah. It
better to
makes
know who's real and who's not.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean that I've learned that the hard way myself too. Is I find people in life who put on a particular face, but aren't aren't what they aren't being who they seem to be. Like going back to that whole saying. But that's the
Yeah.
thing I got to keep in mind for myself too. I don't want to be double-minded and pretend as though I I am embodying the archetype as I ought to, because that's the thing. It's like none of us are perfect, and so I've got to. It's like you said, having that humility to be truthful and to be transparent and to um, not put on a face for others. But what you said was really great there too about nothing that we do is small. Nothing that we do is of lacking consequences. It's like all the choices that we make, like from from what time you wake up in the morning, or to like, because all these different things are set up different other things, and it's like the person at the gas station. If we really understood the the impact of our daily choices, it would really influence, I think, how it is we act on a daily basis, or whether it be like around others or when we're alone, because the things that we do when we're alone is also a testament to like who we are, and like it affects who we are and it changes us. So having that integrity when we're alone to, continue to be on our purpose, and to, because that'll change us into a better person, because we're following that archetype, the divine archetype, a transcendent archetype, following that, and we'll then be in the right place to positively influence another person. Just keeping those sorts of things in mind when we interact with people. And I think it's just it's great having conversations like this where we're able to go back and forth and talk about these sorts of things, because
Well, yeah,
so
we
many
can get to
people.
the depths of the deeper into the understanding, which a lot of, yeah, I go through the same thing. I have many friends who they're just not interested in that. And that's okay. I don't, no, not everyone's going to be, on the same path as everyone else. So it's, why are some trees tall and
uh,
some trees short? It just is what it is. And it's, who was surrounding them. And, there's too many factors to decide why that is what it is. It's not even necessary to go in. So it goes back to, no, go back into embodying the highest version of yourself. Um,
mhm,
but I think one of the beauties of having long form conversations, which now seems to be wanting to be canceled. And as long
yeah.
as I can fight against that, because, and not fight against it in the sense that what are we going to do? We're going to be against understanding and challenging ideas. I mean, that's ridiculous to me. So
What do you think of that whole situation with Joe Rogan and everybody wanting to cancel Spotify and all
I
that?
think it's a
It's not-
big game of chess. I really
oh
think
yeah.
it's a big game of chess. And I don't know all the different variables, but what I would say is that Joe Rogan's not an idiot.
Mhm.
At least not when, and he's surrounded around people who have embodied the values of integrity, and I can just speak on how many those conversations have helped me in my life to further understand myself and to understand my own weaknesses, and wanting to rid myself of those. I mean, David Goggins, and I don't even like pedestalizing people, because I don't want people to pedestalize people. As far as I've seen, is that these people have gone through dirt, and they're trying to help other people go through their own dirt. So to me, that's I mean, to cancel, to me it's you're afraid of understanding. You live in lies. So this is exposing. I mean, when you have these, I I don't see any good of coming from destroying speech. I think we should invite more speech that we disagree with rather than run from it. We should have more difficult conversations. Why? Because it's a challenge to have a disagreement with somebody. The more that you hate somebody, that's a better conversation. That it's more necessary to have those conversations than the people that will just tell you what you want to hear. I want to hear people say, Mike, you're off here, 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 and here. And here's why. I want to know who has my back in the sense that they can give me constructive criticism. And it when they embody it, versus the haters. So I see many people who, you know, I think they're more haters than constructive criticism with Joe Rogan. That's what it, it I mean, I've listened to so many conversations. I mean, you have Navy SEALs on, or, Jordan Peterson, um, I mean, all the other people he's had on, he's had people completely on the left. And now what?
Mhm.
Anything that goes against uh mainstream is right. Like, what if mainstream is sick? Which I think it's more sick. I mean, the amount of hypocrisy. So, I mean, I'm not worried for Joe Rogan. I mean,
Mhm.
not
Oh
to
yeah.
say that you were asking that, but Yeah, that's keep going, Joe. That's what I would say. Keep on
Oh
going
yeah,
because
yeah.
what's the worst thing that could happen? And but that's the thing, that's the cross that people need to decide what they want to bear individually. So I get it on another level, and that's why I say it's also chess because um I don't know what what who's in his ear and who's in. So I don't judge actions either because a lot of people said he shouldn't apologized. Maybe, maybe. I don't know the chess game he's playing. Everybody's playing a different chess game. So
Mm,
on a default, on a simplified view, I'd say, yeah, you should apologize. But what the hell do I know? you know?
mhm,
Um, I think you should double down, but maybe that's coming next because they're gonna they seem to keep poking. So now what
mhm.
happens when he says, no, we're not going to play this game anymore? Well, he already apologized. What do you want somebody to do? Apologize 15 times, 16 times? How many times did they need to apologize before um, you realize the people who are poking the fingers at Joe Rogan are really the ones that need to be apologizing. Maybe depends on the person. There's so many variables that it's like I respect him for watching his words because you have to watch your words. That's what Jordan Peterson does very well because he's not fighting other people. He's fighting their ideas, and that's what I see from Joe Rogan. That's why I made this podcast. I have a lot of viewers at it, but my goal with this is to really is to to get to what are the ideas that bind us together, um and let's have difficult conversations. I had a conversation out here with someone who is completely on the left. I mean, full on Black Lives Matter. um and I had my other buddy who was on here who was complete Trump on the right, and we had a discussion, and it was a little difficult at parts, but that's what needs to happen because these I don't even think I need to say anything else on it. It's ridiculous. What do you think about all this?
Oh, I think it's you hit on some really good points. One question I had: what were you like officiating, but like a discussion between the two of them, or is this on two separate podcasts?
No, I was trying to practicing to be the what do you call it? The um the moderator.
Moderator, yeah,
Yeah, because these are two people I've met in my life that I've appreciated the conversations I've had with both of them. I've had good conversations with both of them, and I see how they disagree so much, but I agree and disagree with both of them, and that's how you fix disagreements is by talking about it. You don't fix them by running away. That only puts you deeper into your own belief system. And God knows you don't have it all figured out. You need to have, there's pieces of truth that are in both sides. So, um, and that goes back into the other thing of humility, right? In order, I think, to be a very, uh, to be the best version of yourself, you have to drop all ideas that you think you have it all figured out. You have to be ready.
yep.
You have to be around people you say, I want you to expose my weaknesses. I want you to destroy my false belief systems because they are going to hold me back. If I believe, like for me, I spoke about for me, I had porn addiction, and that's been my thing. My vice has been lust. Now, if I tell, and I've always grown up with the idea, it's like, oh, I would always hear in my ears, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. That's natural. To me, that's a lie. So the question becomes, how do you destroy that lie without the guilt and shame part, right? So because that's again why it's why I keep repeating the idea of understanding, because when you're operating on guilt and shame, then you can you'll guilt you can guilt and shame everybody. You look for good in people, you'll find good. You look for bad, you find bad. So the better question becomes, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because
Mm,
now we're looking at it from understanding. Now we're looking at it from like, okay, what are the layers here of bullshit that I've believed in? So as I peel off, as you help me peel off my own layers, I help you peel off your layers. Now at the core of that is the strongest version of ourselves. So as long as I'm on guilt shame, you're going to push me away, and that's going to end up making me weaker. So I'm going to put more layers on, and then that to me is the embodiment of right, the garden. People cover themselves up, not realizing that the more they cover themselves up, the more they are disconnected from their true source.
mm. Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, even I think like Genesis 1 through 3, like the chapters there, and that whole issue of like the fall of man and how like Adam and Eve after they had sinned, like they covered themselves and everything. It's yeah, we don't want to be it. I think I think when Jordan Peterson was talking about that particular section, he was talking about how when they covered themselves up with leaves, that was essentially them coming to the realization that they were naked, and that so in other words, it was self-consciousness, and
Mhm.
they came to that realization, and they realized they were vulnerable, because when you're naked, what it like your vulnerabilities are all put on display. So it's like, what do we got to do? It's like, I got to cover up. And that plays in that goes into like a lot of like insecurities like we all have, is like that fear of being exposed for who we really are. And it I know, because I mentioned those three vices of sloth, fear, and lust, and I mean that was a
Yeah.
problem for me as well. Like I think I even mentioned that when I was at grounding camp. Like that was one of the main reasons why I came, was because of that whole vice itself is lust, and wanting to overcome that and like take the steps necessary um to get back on the path and to walk in light of your purpose. And it like the worst place to get is where you start like having doubts about like the archetype itself, and like the
Yeah, in order to overcome it's similar to what you were talking about earlier. In order to overcome the villain, which is in oneself, you have to have a good enough reason why not to give in to the villain, right? Because the villain makes very appealing points, right? Why not? It's like 300, right? Uh, where he's with Xerxes. I'll give you women, you have power, everything you want. Who wouldn't want that, right? So at the stable, the first step is ownership. It's like, oh, of course I want to be a selfish person, because by owning your own selfishness is a pathway to being selfless. If you say no, I am not selfish, you're already if you say I'm not selfish, you're already selfish, in the sense that, and you know what I mean by that. It's not like, if you can't own that weakness, you can't have strength. It's almost like a good soldier. A good soldier to me is one who knows how to obey his commanding officer, but he also has the ability to disobey.
mm, yep. And one thing that's interesting too, but it reminded me, something that you said there reminded me of one particular book that I've been listening to an audio book recently of Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Have you heard
Okay.
of that book?
I now I've heard of C.S. Lewis, of course.
Mhm. Yeah, he wrote a book. I forget if it was before or after Chronicles of Narnia, but I mean he's written a lot of books anyhow. But that's been really helpful for me with regards to like coming up with this whole sort of story, is because I'm trying to work through, okay, what is the vices that people individually have, and what are the vices that I have, like what are the temptations I fall prey to. And essentially that's what the book itself deals with, because it's a fictional account of it's supposed to be like a collection of letters exchanged between one fictional demon called Wormwood, or no, no, I'm sorry, it's a Screw Tape that
Mhm.
he's sending to his nephew Wormwood, telling him about like how like this is how like a experienced demon tempts a man off his path, off of his purpose, and away from God, towards that which are these vices of sin. And because their goal is to get them to their quote unquote master's house, in other words, which is hell. So it's a thing of like steering away a man away from his purpose into complete chaos and complete disarray of his life
Yeah.
and everything that he's worked for. And it's so interesting because he'll phrase it. It's a way to, because the way that C.S. Lewis wrote that book was a way of teaching men how to avoid the temptations themselves, by phrasing in such a way as the demon is explaining his tactics of how to get a person to sin. And he'll talk about the enemy. And one thing I love in that book is different quotes about it was, I think the main one, yeah, I actually have it written down here. I've got like a little journal here of a collection kind of quotes that I've been writing
Awesome.
to help influence how I'm writing my story and everything. It's just a great exercise in general before I go to bed, just kind of
Definitely.
help let myself fall asleep better and whatnot. But one thing I wrote here was a quote from the Screw Tape Letters. The only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Murder is no better than cards if cards do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one. Which I think is just such an incredible quote because it tells it like it is. It's like it's a
Yeah,
slow
send
fade.
that to me because I gotta sit with that because that's definitely,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll
yeah,
send you the quote and I'll send you a link to the audiobook. There's several free audiobooks from C.S. Lewis on YouTube. One guy is this British guy who's like this older gentleman. He's got this British voice or whatever, and it's like it's a pleasure to listen to in my spare time. I'm
yeah.
like halfway through the book right now. Another quote I thought I might share with you as well because I'm trying to get, like I said, get into the head of like, okay, how would a demon in the way? I don't want to sound like,
Oh, don't worry about it. I get it.
yeah,
Well, it's
how would
integrating
someone
dark.
attempt
It's
to?
integrating the dark side. It's
Yeah.
essentially that's been where I've been at because it's like it goes back into growing teeth, right? In order to grow teeth, you have to get in touch with the savage within you without becoming the savage, right? So and that's to me the world, right? The world is the animal, right? The world is the animal. What is the animal? It wants to eat, shit, fuck, and sleep. That's all it wants to do, and that's a part of our experience. But the bigger part is above that, and to give that up doesn't make sense to the egoic mind. No wonder. Why would it? Because I mean, you look at an animal who wants to die, who wants to not, who wants to give up food, who wants to give up. Why would you want to give those things up? And until you develop the understanding for a reason to give those things up, you're not going to give those things up until you suffer through them, which generally what happens. And that's why suffering isn't bad. You don't wish suffering. I don't wish suffering on any man. I wish no pain on anyone, but I understand the benefits of how suffering is seems to be somewhat necessary in our experience, and to deny that, to get rid of that, it means that well, you're not going to have any suffering, you're not going to have any striving, as Jordan Peterson would say. We're going to eliminate striving. So, to
What's a
know.
life? What's a life without striving, right?
Correct. And that's part of the animal. I think the animal is to strive. You strive, and then you don't. It's I equate it to like a seed in the dirt, and life is not in the dirt. We don't live in the dirt. That's not where we're supposed to live. We're supposed to break through the surface and grow and expand and go towards the light, right? When a plant breaks through the surface, it opens up towards the light. Well, to break through that, you have to understand the seed and the dirt, the shit. That's the growth process, and that is reflective, I think, of the animal. You can't break the surface if you don't understand the soil. The soil is the dirt, but you're not supposed to live in the dirt for the rest of your life. But that's a necessary it's a necessary step to breaking the surface. And then once you break through the surface, then you realize how ridiculous the animal is. And
Mm,
but until we get there collectively, it's but the more we embody that within ourselves, the easier it becomes. But it's hard and easy at the same time because you have to strive, you have to go through that struggle. But through the struggle, then it becomes easy. Then because I mean, if you're there's a certain thing I like to David Goggins, it's just like at a certain point, I feel like it's almost easy to him. And starting out must have been hell. I mean, that voice saying, stop running. What are you doing? You're bleeding down your leg. Why are you running? What are you doing? Well, he's confronting that mind that wants to just stay comfortable and all that. So he's, as he says, he's preparing for life. He's preparing for that phone call he gets from a loved one who dies. And how is he going
mm,
to handle that? Well, this badass just ran 800 miles, he'll be able to, or, he's overcome a lot of his internal dialogue that he'll be able to express it more in life. At least that's how I see it.
There's one gentleman who I've been following for a while, and he was of great help to me back in 2020 when I was overcoming some of my own demons and really trying to get back on the path. He also encouraged. I got on like a excuse me. I got on a video call with him prior to having left for a grounding camp, and I told him about the opportunity. How I was heading to grounding camp. He was like, "Dude, go for it." And but this guy is really cool. His name is Emil, and he has his own YouTube channel called Based Brothers. I'll send you a link to that as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, his is great. He doesn't get like a ton of views, maybe like 100, 200, sometimes like 400 for some of his videos, but like just phenomenal content. You had mentioned like silencing the voices in your head that are telling you to like stop or whatever, like, oh, like stop this running or whatever.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about not only about overcoming porn addiction and other things like that, like the addiction to masturbation, all that stuff. He also talks about like being on your purpose, but also the thing there with silencing the voices in your head. He talks about like anxiety and how we as men, like it depends on the person. Some people, they don't have this issue as much as others, but I had this tendency for myself where, and I still struggle with this, but I'm learning how to overcome it, is being able to just be. I mean, Elliot talks about it too, is like
Yeah.
just being without dwelling on like the voices or letting that the a momentary like thought dictate how you think for the rest of the day, like being able to silence the thoughts in your head and to
Or even
press on
let them come through and not identify with them, I think is the core, because
exactly.
it's like, what does Alan Watts say? It's like trying to take an iron to flatten out water. It's like it's not gonna, it's better to just not identify with the thoughts that come in. And it's a process,
Mm,
because the thoughts don't stop. It's just like, oh, you're driving. Why did this person cut me off? Why are they doing it? What is this what is this? Just silence it, like not it, but not silence it. Like I understand it, but the thoughts, oh, that's just a thought that it's coming up. It's like saying, why is it raining? It's just
yeah,
right. It's just raining. That's why it's
yeah,
raining. Oh, if a thought
that
came, a thought went.
self-awareness.
Or you can go into, oh my God, it's raining. It's so bad. And it's so funny when you listen to people talk. It's just like how people will tell you what they think. It's like Jordan. That's what same thing with Jordan Peterson says, and he's spot on. You know, because people don't like that silence. You can notice that too you can notice a lot who's at peace and who's not by the silence, big time.
Yep. Yeah, being able to, and that's been an issue sort of in with people that I know, is you'll see it with them, is if they're comfortable being alone with their thoughts, and if they can be okay with that, because certain people have learned to. It was so interesting because I think Elliot he's from Belize, and he's talking about how well, not he's from Belize, his father is from Belize,
Yeah.
and he was born in America. But what what was interesting, I thought about was I have coworkers, or at least one of my previous jobs I worked in lawn care. I was a lawn care technician, and then I was promoted to sales representative. What was I've since left that company, but um, what was so interesting is there were several people that worked there who were all from Belize. Like the owner of the company was from Belize. Like the man was like in his early 60s, and so was his older brother, who was like one of the lead, I don't know, technicians or like maintenance people for a company. And they have such a completely different way of carrying themselves that just really impressed me, because it's just walking through life with zero worries. And if something goes wrong, like with like a with one of the company vehicles, for example, or anything really, it's like, oh, the rain or whatever, you never hear a complaint, you never hear them um thinking out loud. It's just these things happen. It's like, oh, it's just water
Yeah.
off a duck's back.
Yeah. That should be our natural state, is complaining and whining and worrying about it doesn't do anything. It's like, okay, what can we do?
Mhm. Yeah, I've noticed in my own life too, where I've carried certain bad habits into my life. I've noticed just from watching people like that who don't worry and who don't complain. Like I from watching them, I've seen like how I can implement that in my life. Because an example, I'll be in like my martial arts class, and I had this happen the other day. I noticed it. I was rolling with the so like when you're doing jujitsu, right? Like you're rolling with a guy and like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it's all ground game and everything. Like you're practicing wrestling. There's this one guy who goes to that same martial arts class, and he's preparing for a fight that he's going. It's a mixed martial arts fight that will take place, I think, in Virginia, April 2nd. And he's phenomenal. The guy is super tough, but he's actually even younger than me. I'm 22. I'm going to be 23, and the dude's like maybe 20, 21, something like that. And but the dude's insanely tough and has been through like multiple amateur fights and stuff. So it's just really cool. But I was rolling with him the other day, and it just I was going back to some of those old habits where like I would get done with my roll or whatever, and I would start saying like, "Oh, my arms get tired so quick. Like, why are my arms getting tired?" And the dude's like, "It just makes you stronger, right?" And it just was a little comment, like it was just a little thing, but it made me think. I'm like, wow, like why am I talking about what it is that like why do I have to verbalize my own like struggle or whatever? Like I
Yeah.
can just let it be. It's like it's okay. Like his arms probably even more tired than mine. Like the dude just choked me out with like a rear naked choke or something. Like
Yeah.
like he's probably more tired than me. Like having exerted
Yeah,
that
being
effort.
aware of the things that you say to yourself on a constant basis, it's definitely, yeah, the negative self-talk it's yeah. I with the things that it doesn't serve at all, but it's understandable why it's there. It's the difference between pain versus the suffering, right? Like, pain is inevitable. You're gonna, people are gonna beat you, things are gonna happen to you. But the suffering is completely on us if we want to make that worse, you know. We can
Yep.
lose or we can be miserable at losing, or
Mhm.
we can be grateful for losing. It's like it's when you start getting into that paradigm, it's really crazy. The belief systems are so deep rooted. Um, to be positive is almost um it's like associated with naivety when you try to
Mm.
explain it to people. Because there's a falseness in like, oh, I'll just be positive. Like, no, it just be real. That's it. Be real. You know?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it could because with being real, you're owning that, and you're saying like it's okay to struggle. Everybody struggles, and it's a thing where you you don't have to put on a facade like, oh, just be positive and like or oh, everything's fine. It's like, nah, you're going through a rough time, but you'll get through it. It's like it doesn't last for forever. And so it's a thing where like something can happen where it can be like it goes back to that issue of the small things like aren't really that small in the sense of like what it is that you do, like what it matters, because the things that we think are small, like the things that we say to ourselves, for example, like the thing we think it has no consequence, but it sets you up in such a way that when the going really gets tough, like when because you can be complaining about like small things or seemingly small things but when the really difficult times come, you're not going to have trained your mind to deal with that in
Yeah.
such a way that because think about Joseph in the book of Genesis. The dude went through so much worse than either of us or anyone else listening, but for the most part,
Yeah.
like it because the dude was in prison, he had his brothers like betray him, and all that account of like everything that he went through, yet he never once complained.
Yeah.
Like his keeper,
And now we're mad that our Uber Eats is late.
yeah. Like putting comparing the two together, it's like the dude never once. I think that's one thing that Bible teachers have said before, is that it's Joseph is a quote unquote type of Christ, or in other words, he's a picture in a way, because there isn't any reference to him having once sinned. I mean, yeah, obviously, like he did at some point.
Sure.
Like he's an imperfect man, just like the rest of us. But that's meant in a sense to be kind of a picture, because he in those examples, like he never once had complained. And so it's just it's supposed to serve as an example to us of, this is how you should approach trials and tribulations.
Yeah, it's
Don't
it's the
complain.
logos, right? That's all it is. It's the
Yep.
logos. It's the highest logic. Like we all know that complaining is useless, but we still complain from time to time. But to know that deep in your heart is that complaining literally does nothing. To
Mm.
know that is a superpower. Because then you don't complain. And people go, why don't you complain? Be like, what's the benefit of complaining? It's really that simple. That's the truth is so yeah. There's zero benefit, but it's not about knowing it. It's about embodying it, like you were saying before, right?
Mhm.
When you really
100%.
know it.
Yep.
So good place to stop there, I guess.
Yeah, I reckon so. Probably, I think it went on like 30 more minutes after you had said it.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
fun. Is there any, you said you're working on the book. Is there any social media, anything you want to, you know,
Anything to plug? Yeah. Presently, no. Right now, I'm mostly just putting my nose to the grindstone. Haven't really been on social media a whole lot, to be honest with you. But yeah, so like right now, I mean, you can just keep an eye out, because I'm gonna be working hard and like, trying to put in the effort to make something of high quality for people who are looking for something like that.
yeah,
Because there are different books, different so many there's a wealth of resources for people if they really look for it. And it
yeah,
I've just been
you got to be
amazed.
hungry for it. YouTube,
Yeah.
dude. I mean, YouTube. Even though they're canceling so many people, there's so much. If you just look, just search, research, but the hunger has to be there. So the question becomes how to inspire the hunger, and that's
Mm.
life will do that.
Yeah, I'll for sure send you the link. All right, now I'm not too concerned about particular like advertising myself or whatever. I'm just like focused on like getting it done. One quote I'll leave with you and your audience, just because there's a few that I've written down here. Let's see. Someone would ask. Okay, so okay, yeah, I'll leave this one because this goes back into what it was we were talking about with regards to trials and the approach to like facing them. I was reading is essentially a collection of parables called Nuts for Boys to Crack. Is essentially like it's a really cool book. It's by John Todd. He's since passed away. I think he was like originally like a Sunday school teacher or something at a church, but he's written a bunch of different books. He said at the end of one of his parables, or I guess it's like, yeah, I guess it'd be parable or fable, something like that. He said, "Oh, my son, you will often meet things in divine providence that seem strange to you, and which look as though God were not wise or good. But when these come to be explained hereafter, we shall see that in everything God is wise and good and merciful. We cannot always understand what he does, but just and true are all his ways." So I guess I'll leave you guys with that.
Radical trust.
Amen.
Thanks for coming on, brother. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. You have a good one.